They gave me Apache twin sisters as slaves as a reward, but I protected them like family. The sun was setting over the rugged plains, casting long shadows across the dry earth. Dust swirled in the wind as the cowboy, a man weathered by years of hardship, rode slowly toward the camp. His horse's hooves barely made a sound against the cracked dirt road. His name was Cole, a man of few words who preferred the company of horses to people. He had spent years working the land, fighting when needed, and staying out of trouble whenever he could. But trouble always had a way of finding him. He had been hired to help with a skirmish, a fight over land and cattle that had turned bloody. It was a dangerous world out here, where men lived by their guns and only the strongest survived. Cole had done his part, and now he was headed back to the camp to collect his reward. The reward, as it turned out, was not what he expected. As he entered the camp, he was greeted by the stern face of his superior, a man named Jackson. Jackson was a hard man with a reputation for cruelty. He looked at Cole with an approving nod.
You did good out there, Cole.
You've earned yourself a reward. Cole shifted in his saddle, unsure of what to expect. He had heard of men getting land, cattle, or even gold for their efforts, but this was different. Jackson's eyes glinted in the fading light, as if he were about to reveal a secret. "They're Apache!" Jackson said with a smile, pointing toward a small group of women standing by a campfire. "The twins! You'll take them with you as a token for your service."
A prize, if you will. Cole's heart sank.
He looked at the women. Two young sisters no older than 20, with long dark hair and proud faces. Their expressions were filled with fear and defiance. The way they stood, side by side, told him everything he needed to know. They were not weak. They were survivors. He turned back to Jackson, his voice low. "What do you mean? Take them with me." "Slaves," Jackson replied, as though it were the most natural thing in the world. "The tribe they came from is no longer a threat. They're yours now as payment for your loyalty." Cole stared at the twins, his heart heavy. He had heard the stories about how the Apache had been treated, forced from their land, hunted down like animals, and enslaved by the very people who had stolen their homes. He had never thought he would be part of that system. He had always tried to stand apart, to keep his hands clean. But now here they were, two young women, treated as property, and he was expected to take them, as if they were nothing more than cattle. "Take them," Jackson repeated, his voice sharp, "or I'll find someone else who will."
You earned them fair and square. Cole was silent for a long moment, staring at the twins. He could feel the weight of their gaze on him, the silent plea in their eyes.
They were desperate, but they would never beg. They were Apache. They would fight to the end. Something inside Cole shifted. He had seen too many innocent lives lost, too many people treated as less than human. He couldn't be a part of that. He looked back at Jackson, his jaw set. "I don't want them as slaves," he said quietly, but firmly.
I'll take them, but they won't be treated like that. They'll be free.
Jackson frowned, his eyes narrowing. "You're not in charge here, Cole. You do what you're told, or you'll find yourself out of a job."
"And you won't get any of your reward."
Cole didn't flinch. "I'll take them, but I'll treat them with respect, and I'll make sure no one else lays a hand on them." There was a tense silence, and then Jackson gave a harsh laugh. "Suit yourself. Just don't come crying to me when things go south." "You've been warned," Cole nodded, turning his horse toward the twins. As he approached them, they didn't move, but their eyes followed him, wary yet curious. They had probably been through too much to trust anyone, least of all a man like him. Spout. He dismounted, his boots crunching on the dry ground. "I'm Cole," he said softly, trying to keep his voice calm. "I'm not here to hurt you. You're not slaves to me." The twins said nothing, their faces unreadable. But Cole could see the slight shift in their posture, the way their bodies relaxed just a little, though they still held their heads high. The older of the two, the one with darker eyes, stepped forward.
"We don't want your help," she said, her voice strong but tinged with sadness. "We are, Apache."
"We are not to be saved. Not by you or anyone else." Cole's heart tightened. He could see the pain in her eyes, the way she tried to hide her fear behind her anger. It wasn't just the fear of being captured. It was the fear of losing everything. Their people, their land, their freedom. "I understand," he said, keeping his voice steady. "But I'm not here to take anything from you. I'm here to make sure you're treated fairly. No one will hurt you while you're with me." The other sister, a little younger, looked up at him with suspicion. "Why?" she asked quietly. "Why would you help us?" "Because it's the right thing to do," Cole replied simply. "I don't believe in treating people like property. Not even if the world thinks it's okay. You'll be free to do as you wish." "I'll make sure of it." The twins exchanged a long look. For a moment, the camp was silent, save for the crackling of the fire. Finally, the older sister nodded, a small sign of trust. "Thank you," she whispered, though her voice was thick with emotion. "But we won't forget who we are." "I don't expect you to," Cole said quietly. "I won't ask you to." With that, Cole led the twins away from the camp. The sun had nearly disappeared beyond the horizon, leaving only the faint glow of the last light. As they walked, Cole kept his eyes forward, but he couldn't shake the feeling that this was the beginning of something much bigger than he had ever expected. A bond had been formed that couldn't be broken, no matter what the world thought. He had chosen to protect these women, and in doing so, he had chosen a side that wasn't about power or reward, but about humanity. The journey from the camp was long, and the darkening sky cast eerie shadows over the barren landscape. The wind whipped through the dry grass, stirring up small clouds of dust that danced like restless spirits. Cole rode at the front, leading the way, while the twin sisters followed on foot. They had refused to ride with him, unwilling to show any sign of dependence, even though they were clearly exhausted. He could see the strain on their faces, the way they held themselves back, as though every step they took was a silent defiance. Despite their silence, Cole could sense their eyes on him. They were watching, weighing his every move, every word. He couldn't blame them. After everything they had been through, who could trust easily? Who would want to believe in the kindness of a man who had just been given them as a reward, like objects or livestock? Cole's thoughts were heavy as he looked ahead.
He had promised them freedom, but in a world like this where power and violence ruled, how could he deliver on that promise?
He was just one man, a cowboy with a past he wasn't proud of, but something deep inside him stirred. He wasn't going to let them down, not after seeing the fear in their eyes, the way they had held onto each other like lifelines. As the night wore on, the chill in the air grew sharper. The landscape around them seemed to stretch on forever, a barren wilderness with no shelter in sight. The twins walked in silence, their footsteps steady but heavy, as if the weight of their past still clung to them. Every now and then Cole would glance back at them, making sure they weren't too far behind. He knew they were strong, but he also knew that this world was unforgiving.
"We'll stop soon," Cole said, his voice low but firm.
There's a creek up ahead, We'll rest there. The older sister nodded slightly, though she didn't speak. Her sister, the younger of the two, looked at him for a moment, her eyes filled with suspicion, but also a hint of curiosity. "You really think we'll be safe?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Cole met her gaze, his expression serious. "I'm doing everything I can to make sure you are, but I won't lie to you. This isn't going to be easy. We've got a long way to go." The younger sister nodded slowly but didn't say anything more. She had the look of someone who had long ago stopped believing in promises. Her eyes told a story of loss, of a people pushed to the brink of extinction, of a life that had been stolen from them. Cole could feel the weight of their history, of everything they had lost, pressing down on him like a heavy blanket. They walked in silence for hours, the only sounds the soft thud of their boots on the ground and the occasional rustle of the wind. The twins seemed to move as one, their movements synchronized, like two parts of the same soul. They spoke little to each other, but there was a connection between them that was unspoken, a bond forged by blood and shared pain. As they reached the creek, Cole dismounted and led the horses to the water. He filled their canteens, then turned to face the twins. "Sit," he said, his tone softer than before. The older sister gave him a sharp look but said nothing. She took a seat by the creek, her back straight, her eyes scanning the horizon. Her sister followed suit, sitting beside her, their heads tilted toward the water, their expressions unreadable. Cole worked quickly, gathering dry wood and kindling. He had done this countless times before, and soon a fire crackled to life, casting a warm glow on the darkened landscape. The flames danced, flickering in the night air, their light casting long shadows on the ground. When the fire was strong enough, Cole sat down a little distance from the twins, giving them space. He could feel their eyes on him, but he didn't look up. Instead, he stared into the fire, the flames dancing before his eyes, the heat of it on his face. He had been in worse situations before. He had fought battles, lost friends, and witnessed horrors that no man should ever see. But this felt different. He couldn't explain why, but it was as if the weight of the world was pressing down on him, and he had no choice but to bear it.
After a few minutes, the silence became unbearable.
Cole turned to look at the twins. The older sister had her arms wrapped around her knees, her gaze distant, as if she were somewhere far away. Her sister, though, was watching him closely, her eyes narrowed, trying to read him. "What do you want from us?" she asked suddenly, her voice cutting through the silence. "Why are you doing this? You don't owe us anything." Cole sighed and looked at the fire again. "You're right. I don't owe you anything. But that doesn't mean I'm going to stand by and watch you suffer. I've seen enough suffering in my time. I've done things I'm not proud of, but I'm trying to do better. For you, for me, for everyone." The younger sister was silent for a moment, then spoke again. "Why do you care? Why not just leave us and move on with your life?" Cole shook his head slowly. "Because what happened to you isn't right, and I can't walk away from that." "I don't expect you to trust me, but I'll do my best to make sure you're safe."
The older sister spoke then, her voice low but firm. "You're risking everything for two strangers."
"We're not your responsibility." Cole turned his head to meet her gaze. "I never said you were." "But what's happening to you isn't right, and I'm not going to stand by and let it happen. You're more than what people have made you out to be." "You deserve more than that." The fire crackled as they sat in silence. The weight of his words hung in the air, unspoken but understood. They were more than just victims. They were more than the roles they had been forced into. They were human, with hopes, dreams, and a past that no one could take away from them.
Breath. After a long pause, the younger sister spoke again. We don't need your pity.
But maybe we can work together. Cole nodded, understanding the quiet shift in her tone.
I'm not offering pity. I'm offering help.
If you'll accept it. The twins exchanged a look, and for the first time since they had met, there was a flicker of something resembling hope in their eyes. It was small, but it was there. They didn't trust him yet, and Cole knew it would take time. But maybe, just maybe, they could find a way to help each other.
As the night stretched on, Cole sat by the fire, lost in thought.
He knew the road ahead would be difficult, and there were dangers he couldn't predict. But one thing was certain. He wasn't going to let the twins face it alone. Breath. Whatever happened next, he would protect them like family. And if that meant defying the world, then so be it. For the first time in a long while, Cole felt something he hadn't felt in years. Purpose. The fire burned brightly in front of him, and for once he felt like he was on the right path. The path to redemption. The path to something greater than himself. The days that followed were long and quiet. The road ahead seemed endless, stretching out in front of them like an unbroken trail of dust and sun. They traveled through barren landscapes, flat plains that stretched as far as the eye could see, rolling hills with scrubby brush, and occasional groves of trees that offered some respite from the harsh midday heat. As they rode, Cole kept an eye on the twins, though he kept his distance, allowing them to move at their own pace. The sisters hadn't said much since their quiet agreement by the fire. The older sister still wore that same wary look in her eyes, as though she were waiting for the moment when everything would fall apart. The younger one, though, seemed to soften a little each day. She still held herself with a quiet pride, but every now and then Cole would catch her looking at him with a mixture of curiosity and uncertainty. Breaths. She didn't trust him, not yet. But there was something in her gaze that suggested she was beginning to wonder if maybe, just maybe, he wasn't like the others. The bond between them was starting to shift, but it wasn't going to be easy. Cole knew that. They had been torn from their homes, forced to endure horrors that no one should ever have to experience. Their trust wasn't something he could just take. He had to earn it, and he knew it would take time. One evening, as they made camp near a small stream, the air was thick with silence. The sun was just setting, casting a soft orange glow across the horizon. The fire crackled in the center of their camp, its light dancing in the faces of the twins, who sat across from Cole. The older sister, who had yet to speak much to him, finally broke the silence. "Where are we going?" she asked, her voice low but steady. "What's the point of this?" Cole had expected the question, but it still caught him off guard. He thought for a moment before answering. "We're going wherever it's safe," he said. "I'll keep you protected."
You won't have to worry about being sold or treated like property anymore. That's my promise to you.
The older sister looked at him, her dark eyes searching his face as if trying to find the truth in his words.
And when we're safe, what happens then? Do we just disappear?
Is that all you want? Cole's throat tightened at her question. It was a fair one, but it struck him harder than he anticipated. "No," he replied, his voice firm but thoughtful. "You'll be free to do whatever you want. If you want to go back to your people, I'll help you get there. If you want to start a new life, I'll help with that too."
I don't want anything from you. I'm not asking for anything in return.
disgust. The silence between them deepened. Bress, the younger sister, who had been quiet until now, finally spoke, her voice small but clear. "And what if we don't trust you? What if we never do?" Cole looked at her, seeing the quiet defiance in her eyes, the way she stood her ground. She was strong. He had to give her that. "That's your choice," he said gently. "I'm not going to force you to trust me, but I'm not going to give up on you either. You'll see, we'll get through this together." The older sister shook her head, a small, almost imperceptible smile crossing her face. "You're stubborn," she said softly. "But maybe that's not such a bad thing." They didn't speak much more that night. The fire flickered in the dark, its warmth filling the silence between them. But for the first time since they'd started traveling together, Cole felt a shift. It wasn't much, just a small crack in the wall of suspicion and fear that had surrounded them. But it was enough. The twins were beginning to see him differently. Maybe they didn't trust him completely yet, but they were starting to understand that he wasn't their enemy. Over the next few days, the mood in their camp lightened, if only slightly. The twins still kept to themselves, but they began to open up a little. They told Cole stories of their lives before they were taken, about the land they had known, the people they had loved, the way their world had been before it was shattered. Cole listened, not saying much, just letting them speak. There was a rawness to their words, a deep pain that he couldn't help but feel for. He hadn't known much of their culture before this, but now he was starting to understand just how much they had lost. The older sister spoke about her childhood, growing up in a village by the river, where the sound of the water was a constant presence. First, she told stories of her family, of hunting and gathering, of her father teaching her to ride and use a bow. Her voice softened when she spoke of her mother, a woman strong and proud, who had always taught her to stand tall no matter what life threw at her. The pain in her voice was unmistakable as she spoke of the day their village was attacked. How they had been forced to flee, and how they had been captured by men like the ones who had taken them from their people. The younger sister had her own stories, stories of the deep forests, of running through the trees with her friends, of playing by the fire with her mother and father. Her stories were filled with laughter, but they quickly turned to sorrow as she spoke of the destruction that had come to their home, the way everything had been torn apart in an instant.
Cole felt a deep sorrow for them both, but he also felt a new sense of determination. Brap! Brap!
He couldn't change the past, but he could make sure they had a chance at a future, a real future, a future that was theirs to decide, not someone else's. One afternoon, as they crossed a river on horseback, Cole noticed a dust cloud in the distance. At first he thought it was just the wind, but the cloud was too thick, and it was moving toward them. His instincts kicked in, and he motioned for the twins to follow him as he rode toward a small patch of trees for cover. "They might have seen us," he said, his voice low. "We need to hide." The twins looked at him, their eyes wide with fear, but they didn't hesitate. They spurred their horses on, following him toward the trees. As they approached the cover, Cole glanced back over his shoulder. The dust cloud was closer now, and he could see figures on horseback, riding fast, their faces hidden behind the dust.
"Get down!" Cole hissed. "We don't know who they are yet." The twins slid off their horses, crouching low to the ground as Cole dismounted and tied the horses to a tree. He crouched beside them, his heart racing, every sense on high alert. The sound of hooves grew louder, and Cole's hand instinctively went to the pistol at his side. The last thing he needed right now was a fight. The riders appeared on the horizon, their horses kicking up dirt as they approached. Breath, hoping they wouldn't see them. His eyes darted between the figures, looking for any sign of recognition, any clue as to who they were. Narration. As the riders drew closer, Cole could see that they weren't soldiers or ranchers. They were Apache,
Riders like the twins, but different, more hardened. The older sister stiffened beside him, and Cole knew she recognized them. These weren't just random riders. These were people from her past. The riders slowed as they passed, scanning the area. Cole's heart pounded in his chest. He had to think fast. "Stay down," he whispered, his voice barely audible. He prayed that they wouldn't notice the group hiding beneath the trees. The riders continued on, their eyes scanning the ground as they moved past. When the last rider passed and the sound of hooves faded into the distance, Cole exhaled a sigh of relief. "That was close," he said, looking at the twins. "Do you okay?" The older sister didn't answer immediately. Her eyes were still fixed on the trail where the riders had disappeared, her face a mask of unreadable emotion. But she nodded slightly. "Thank you," she said quietly. "We were almost found." Cole didn't say anything for a moment, letting the weight of the situation sink in. He had just barely kept them safe, and there were sure to be more dangers ahead. But he had proven something, both to himself and to the twins. He wasn't going to let them down. Not now.
Not ever. The days seemed to blend together as they continued their journey.
Cole. The twins and their horses moved steadily through the harsh, wide-open plains. With every mile, the land became even more desolate, stretching endlessly beneath a bright, unrelenting sun. The wind swept across the landscape, kicking up dust that made the air feel thick and suffocating. But through it all, Cole kept his eyes fixed on the horizon, determined to protect the twins as he had promised. They didn't speak much. The older sister, who had begun to soften slightly since their first conversations, was still cautious. But she kept a watchful eye on him. But there was a growing trust in her movements. The younger sister, though quieter, seemed to be warming to him too. She had asked him more questions in the last few days than ever before. Questions about his past, his life, and what had made him so different from the men who had once captured them. Race. Still, the fear and uncertainty lingered in their eyes, and Cole knew they weren't ready to fully let their guard down. They had been through too much, had seen too many betrayals to trust easily. But he understood.
He wasn't offended.
They needed time. He was patient. He would wait until they were ready.
That morning, they woke early, as usual, and started to prepare for another long day of travel.
There was a sense of unease in the air, an unspoken tension that Cole could feel but couldn't explain. It was something in the way the twins moved, in the way they kept looking over their shoulders, as if expecting something to appear out of the dust. Cole didn't say anything. He just kept his focus on the trail, his hand resting lightly on his rifle, eyes scanning the horizon. By midday, the sun had reached its highest point, beating down relentlessly. They had found a small grove of trees earlier, a rare patch of shade, and it was here that Cole decided to stop for a rest. They dismounted and led the horses to a nearby stream to drink. The twins didn't speak much, but they moved with quiet purpose, each action deliberate. Death. It was then that Cole noticed something out of the corner of his eye, a figure in the distance, riding toward them at a fast pace. He squinted against the sun, trying to make out who it was. The figure was moving too quickly for him to be sure, but something about the way the rider held themselves seemed off. "Get down!" Cole said sharply to the twins, his voice low but firm. They both froze at the sound of his tone, and for the first time since their journey began, he saw fear in their eyes. This wasn't just some random rider. They knew something he didn't. Without another word, the twins crouched low behind the trees, and Cole quickly unsaddled the horses, tying them securely to the thick trunks of the trees. His hand hovered over his gun, but he didn't draw it yet. He needed more information. The rider was getting closer now, fast and relentless, and Cole could hear the sound of hooves pound against the dry earth. He crouched low beside the trees, motioning for the twins to stay hidden. Every muscle in his body tensed as the rider neared. The figure was almost upon them when, suddenly, they stopped. Cole's heart skipped a beat as he tried to make out who it was. The rider dismounted quickly, pulling their horse to a halt just a few yards away from the grove where Cole and the twins were hiding. Then, to Cole's surprise, the rider pulled off their hat, revealing a familiar face, a face he had hoped never to see again. It was Jackson. Cole's stomach sank. The last person he wanted to see. The man who had ordered the capture of the twin sisters. The man who had treated them like property, like rewards to be claimed. The man who had never once shown the slightest ounce of compassion. Lister stood there, his eyes scanning the trees, searching for any sign of movement. "Well, well, well," Jackson's voice called out, his tone smug and confident. "Look what we have here. Didn't think you'd be hiding out in the trees, Cole." Cole's grip tightened around the rifle, but he kept his voice calm. "What do you want, Jackson?" His voice was steady, though inside his pulse was racing. "Don't act so surprised," Jackson sneered, taking a step forward, his boots crunching against the dry ground. "I know exactly what you're up to."
"You think you can just take what's mine and run off into the wilds. But that's not how it works. You took my property."
"And now it's time to pay the price." Cole stood up slowly, positioning himself between Jackson and the twins, who were still hidden behind the trees. "He wasn't about to let this man take them back. They're not your property, Jackson," Cole said, his voice calm but firm. Breaths. "You're not taking them anywhere." Jackson laughed, the sound harsh and grating. "Oh, I think you're mistaken. You've gotten yourself into something you don't understand, Cole. This isn't a game. These are Apache women. You can't just decide you're going to keep them as your own." Psst. "They're not animals," Cole shot back, his eyes narrowing. "They're people. And I'm not letting you take them from me." Jackson's face twisted into a sneer as he took a step closer. "Then you'll have to face the consequences, won't you?" With a quick motion, he drew a revolver from his belt and aimed it at Cole. The action was fast, but Cole was quicker. In one smooth motion, he grabbed his own pistol and fired first. The shot rang out in the still air, echoing through the trees. Jackson staggered back, his gun falling from his hand as he clutched at his side. "Get down!" Cole shouted to the twins as he quickly ducked behind a nearby tree, his heart pounding in his chest. The twins obeyed without hesitation, crouching low to the ground, and Cole took cover beside them. His eyes were fixed on Jackson, who was still on his knees, grimacing in pain. Psst. Blood seeped through his fingers, staining his shirt as he gasped for breath. "Don't kill me," Jackson pleaded, his voice strained. "I'll... just don't kill me." Cole's eyes flicked to the twins for a moment before he made his decision. He knew that Jackson wasn't someone who would stop at just one warning. He had to make sure this man never hurt anyone again. But instead of firing again, Cole took a step forward and lowered his gun. He looked down at Jackson, his expression cold. "I'm not going to kill you," Cole said quietly. "But if you ever come near them again, I will."
Jackson looked up at him, eyes wide with fear and disbelief.
For a moment, the two men just stood there, locked in a silent standoff. Jackson's breath was ragged, but he seemed to understand that Cole wasn't bluffing. He had nothing left to say. "Leave," Cole said, his voice low but firm. "Now." Jackson hesitated for a moment, then, with a final venomous glance, he stumbled to his feet and staggered away, holding his side. He didn't look back as he mounted his horse and rode off into the distance. Cole stood still, watching until Jackson was nothing more than a speck on the horizon. When he was sure the danger had passed, he turned back to the twins. "They're gone," he said, his voice softer now. The older sister looked at him, her expression unreadable. For a moment, neither of them said anything. Then, slowly, she nodded.
"Thank you," she whispered, her voice filled with gratitude.
Frowned. Cole nodded in return. "I told you I wouldn't let anyone hurt you." The younger sister gave him a small, hesitant smile. It wasn't much, but it was enough. It was a sign that they were starting to believe him. That, despite everything they had been through, they were beginning to see him not as a stranger, but as someone who was truly on their side. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows over the land, Cole felt a sense of resolve settle in his chest. The road ahead was still long, and there would be more dangers to face, more obstacles to overcome. But for the first time, he truly believed they could make it. But together. The morning came quietly, the first light of dawn creeping over the horizon. The air was cool, and a soft breeze rustled the leaves of the trees around their camp. Cole woke to the sound of birds calling to one another, their songs breaking the stillness of the early hours. He stretched, feeling the familiar aches in his muscles, the weariness from days of travel. But there was something different in the air today, a sense of calm that hadn't been there before. The twins were still asleep, their bodies curled close to the fire for warmth. The older sister had her back to him, her head resting on her knees, while her sister lay on her side, her face softened by sleep. Cole watched them for a moment, the two women who had been through so much now finding a small measure of peace in this hidden corner of the world. He was determined to keep it that way. He stood quietly and moved toward the creek to wash his face, the cool water refreshing against his skin. His thoughts drifted, as they often did these days, to what lay ahead. They were closer now to the valley he had planned to take them to, a place where they could live without the fear of being hunted. But even in the safety of the valley, he knew their struggles wouldn't end. The world outside was still dangerous, and as long as the twins were known to be alive, there would always be someone looking for them. Back after a few moments, Cole returned to the camp. He wasn't sure what the future held for them, but one thing was certain. He was going to make sure that, no matter what, the twins would have the chance to build something of their own. They deserved that, at the very least. And maybe, just maybe, they could finally begin to heal. The older sister stirred as he returned, her eyes fluttering open. She sat up slowly, stretching her arms above her head, and glanced at him. "Morning," she said, her voice still rough from sleep, but with a softness that had grown over the days. "Morning," Cole replied, giving her a small smile. He felt a sense of warmth toward her, though it was still subtle. She had come a long way from the guarded woman he had met days ago. Breaths. She wasn't entirely open yet, but there was a trust between them that hadn't been there before. Her sister woke shortly after, rubbing her eyes and yawning. The two exchanged a quiet glance before they both stood up, stretching their legs. The camp was quiet, peaceful, and for the first time, Cole felt a real sense of hope. "Ready to move on?" Cole asked, packing up his few belongings. The older sister nodded, her face serious but thoughtful. "Bert, we don't have much choice, do we?" "No," Cole agreed, looking at the path ahead. "But it's safer than where we've been." "We'll make it." After everything they had been through, there was a new determination in the air. The twins knew that they were no longer at the mercy of the people who had taken them. They had made it this far, and Cole would make sure they kept moving forward. Even though they had faced more than their fair share of hardship, something in their eyes told him they were ready for what came next. They packed their things quickly, and with the horses saddled and ready to go, they began their journey once more. The sun was higher now, and the heat of the day was settling in. but for the first time in days, the atmosphere felt lighter, less tense. It was as though the world was giving them a chance to breathe. They rode in silence for much of the day, the rhythmic sound of hooves on the ground filling the air.
Cole kept a watchful eye on the twins, but they seemed more relaxed than they had been.
The older sister, though still quiet, didn't seem as wary of him. She had begun to trust his presence, even if just a little. The youngest sister was more open, her questions and conversations flowing more easily, though she still held back some of her fears. As the day stretched on, the landscape began to change. The barren plains gave way to rolling hills, and in the distance, Cole could see the outline of trees. It was the valley he had been aiming for, the place he hoped they could call home.
They would be safe here. Or at least, safer than they had been.
By evening, they reached the valley. It was a secluded area, tucked away between two mountain ranges. The air here was cooler, and the sound of the nearby river added a sense of calm that made it feel like a place of refuge. There was an abandoned cabin by the river, overgrown with vines and surrounded by wildflowers. It was small but sturdy, and it would be perfect for them to start over. "We made it," Cole said softly, his eyes scanning the area. He could see the relief in the twins' faces as they dismounted, their tense shoulders finally relaxing. The older sister looked around, her eyes wide with awe. "It's peaceful," she said, her voice almost a whisper. "I thought you might like it," Cole replied with a smile. They spent the evening unpacking and settling into the cabin. It wasn't much, but it was a start. Cole built a fire in the hearth, and they sat down to eat the small meal they had prepared. The twins didn't speak much during dinner, but there was a quiet understanding between them all. Breaths. The weight of the past was still there, but for the first time it felt like they were taking a step towards something new, something better. After they ate, they sat around the fire, the warm glow casting long shadows across the walls of the cabin. Cole could hear the crackling of the wood and the sound of the river flowing gently outside. Brace. It was a peaceful night, and for the first time in a long while, Cole allowed himself to relax. He hadn't realized how much he needed this, how much he had been carrying with him. But now, surrounded by the quiet of the valley, he could breathe. The older sister broke the silence, her voice soft but steady. "You've kept your promise," she said, looking at Cole. "We're safe now." "You didn't give up on us." Cole glanced at her, his eyes meeting hers. "I told you I wouldn't." She smiled, a small but genuine smile. "I know, and I believe you." The younger sister nodded in agreement. "You kept us safe when no one else would. I don't know how to thank you."
You don't have to thank me," Cole replied, his voice warm. "You've been through more than anyone should."
"This is just the beginning. I'll be here for whatever comes next." Psst. The night passed quietly, the crackling of the fire the only sound in the cabin. Cole could feel the weight of the journey lift just a little. They had made it. They had found a place where they could finally be free. In the days that followed, they worked together to fix up the cabin, clearing away the overgrowth and repairing what needed attention. There was still much to do, but the work felt good. It was a kind of freedom, a chance to rebuild something from the ground up. The twins began to open up more, sharing stories of their past and their hopes for the future. They spoke of their families, of the lives they had once known. There was sadness in their words, but there was also hope. For the first time in a long time, they began to believe that maybe, just maybe, they could have a future. As the weeks passed, they grew stronger. The valley became their home, a place where they could live without the constant fear of being hunted. They had their own space, their own lives to rebuild. They were no longer slaves, no longer captives. Breaths. They were free. Cole had kept his promise to them. He had given them the chance to live their lives on their own terms, and in doing so, he had found something for himself too, a sense of purpose, a sense of belonging. For the first time in a long time, he felt like he was exactly where he was meant to be. As the seasons changed, the valley became a place of peace and healing. Cole, the twins, and their horses lived there, working the land and finding joy in the simple things. They had started over, together, right? And for the first time in a long while, they were truly free.
No one came looking for them.
And that was the way it should be. They were free to live their lives, and Cole couldn't help but feel proud of how far they had come. They had faced the worst of the world, and now, here in this quiet valley, they could finally begin to heal. And that was more than anyone could have ever promised them.